Daniel Johnston is a true artist in every sense of the word. He can draw, play a few instruments, and sing, kinda. While he's far from what you'd call a virtuoso musician, he has this authentic and raw approach to songwriting that not only makes his music stand out, but turned him into one of the most highly regarded figures in home-recorded music. While not the first artist to record from home using a reel-to-reel tape recorder, he's arguably the most important, alongside R. Stevie Moore. The low audio quality of his works would go on to popularize what we now know as the lo-fi genre descriptor. Now, when I say this album is lo-fi, I really do mean lo-fi. If you go into this album expecting pitchfork or something like that, then you're probably going to have horrific nightmares about this album for several weeks, just like I did. Expect an album that sounds like it was recorded on your dad's old BlackBerry, or better yet, something that came out way before 1983. The fascinating part of this album's release year is how much more difficult these DIY tapes were to distribute. Daniel actually recorded this album numerous times, as whenever someone wanted a copy, he had to completely re-record and redraw the cover art from scratch, meaning the version that we're all familiar with today might not even be the best one in existence. In order for Daniel to spread these tapes around, he had to get creative. For example, when he worked as a McDonald's employee, he would put his tapes in the food bags of musicians or cute girls, essentially becoming the first guy to say, "Hey man, check out my mixtape." If you want more information about Daniel, then I'd highly recommend his documentary, The Devil and Daniel Johnston, as it's not only a great biopic of Daniel's life, but an interesting look into how home-recorded music was distributed. He made numerous albums in the 80s, all of which are similar in style, but Hi How Are You remains his most popular after all these years. Why is that? Is it better than the rest? Is the cover easiest to latch onto? Or is it because Kurt Cobain famously had a shirt of... it's probably that one. These lo-fi tapes weren't the only thing that Daniel made during his career, as he briefly signed to Atlantic Records to make professionally recorded music. He was offered a deal at Elektra Records, but declined because Metallica was on the label and he thought they were possessed by Satan. I am not making this up. The music at this point in his career isn't talked about as often because 1, his time on Atlantic was cut short due to poor sales, and 2, Daniel's approach to songwriting really works best in these lo-fi home-recorded tapes. The poor audio quality, simple instrumentals, and occasional sound collage detours all make the intimacy and realness of Daniel's lyrics hit that much harder. This feeling is illustrated right from the start with Poor You, which manages to be one of the most heart-wrenching openings I've heard to any album despite having nothing but vocals. If you couldn't tell from the Metallica story, Daniel suffers from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and while I don't usually like to go into artists' personal lives like that, it's clearly influenced most, if not all, of the lyrics in his music, so much so that I was actually kind of freaked out by this thing upon first listen. The descriptions of feeling disconnected from reality, avoiding others at all costs, and seeing imaginary figures immediately put you into the mindset that he is, without the use of a backing instrumental whatsoever. This also makes the surreal imagery in later tracks a bit sadder knowing the mental status that it came from. After this introduction is a variety of different styles and lyrical ideas spanning from more acapellas to guitars, pianos, old jazz tracks, and the sync.
Running water, where are you running from?
Prior to this, Daniel had mostly relied on simple chord organ rhythms to back most of his tracks. This instrument shows up on here a couple times, including the second song, Big Business Monkey. The song's about Daniel's distaste for his boss at whatever fast food place he was currently working at the time. While it is slightly humorous, the overwhelmingly pessimistic lyrics about everything coming to an end keep the song in line with the rest of the album. Walking the Cow has a similarly bleak sentiment in how going through the same routine every day causes him to question why he's on this earth at all. I understand that Daniel's vocals aren't going to be for everyone, I mean just check out the comments of this Mac commercial, but you can truly hear the pain and the sheer rawness of everything he's saying, especially with the song's chorus. Despair Came Knocking, as you can tell from the title, personifies the feeling of despair. Daniel plays guitar on this track, but hadn't been learning the instrument for very long, so the melody's pretty simple. So much so that if this guitar lead was put into the context of any other song, it'd be easy to criticize. But since this is a lo-fi tape, the simplicity works better than it would have had it been more complicated. After this 5-track intro, the tape feels more like a collage of heartbreaking moments rather than actual songs, creating a medley of unpredictability. Whether it's an a cappella like I'll Never Marry or backed with subtle instrumentation like Get Yourself Together, the product feels like one cohesive whole. Thematically, the songs all build off of one another, with Nervous Love highlighting his lack of social skills with women, then being followed up with I'll Never Marry. Get Yourself Together is one of the album's slightly optimistic moments, and even if it is only 20 seconds, makes for one of my favorite tracks. I love the vocal melody and the hard-hitting yet faint percussion that looms in the background. The last leg of this album continues to surprise and keep the listener invested with how much Daniel is able to work in using so little. Desperate Man Blues has Daniel singing over this 1960s jazz track, and while it is difficult to make out everything that's going on musically, it feels like you're listening to an old, pre-war jazz singer talk bluntly about mental health. Kind of a surreal thing to hear because of how lo-fi the recording is, but fascinating nonetheless. In fact, I think this is an example of a track that wouldn't necessarily have been as good had it been professionally recorded. That's not to say the songwriting isn't good, but it definitely benefits from the context of which it was recorded. Hey Joe is without a doubt my favorite song on the entire tape. It's a raw, authentic piano ballad that, while pretty simple in its chord progression, finds so much beauty and simplicity. It's like when Daniel was at his lowest, the angel figure that he sees at night came down and told him that everything would be okay. The song, while maybe about himself, is told in second person, as if directly speaking to the audience. He uses a few names to address those he's speaking to, so it doesn't feel like he's straight up breaking the fourth wall, thus working to the song's benefit even further. The last two songs put Daniel into the shoes of this Joe character that he made up on that very track. Keep Punching Joe is another song performed over a 60s jazz record, and he opens up about his family and how they weren't supportive of the art that he spent all his time making. For as depressing and hopeless as this whole tape has been up until this point, the closer, No More Pushing Joe Around, is a bit of triumph. It's an a cappella like the opener, only with Daniel recording his voice twice in order to harmonize with himself. The two voices don't entirely sync up, but it kinda adds to the song's amateurish character. Overall, this is one of my all-time favorite albums, but one that I understand isn't gonna be for everyone. Daniel's voice can be a bit grating, the lo-fi recording can be a bit off-putting, and the sadness of all the lyrics can be too much to handle. It's an album that legitimately freaked me out on first listen and left a mark on me like very few others have. It's also an album that's relatively important in the grander scheme of music history, as it's an early example of an entirely independent artist recording from home and seeing relatively big success in the underground.